It's the late week weekly, which seems a common occurrence on the Blue Room. It is Friday. Everton are playing tomorrow. Everton have got Brighton at home. Everton are feeling confident, and I've probably got the most confident Evertonian that I've ever met in my life with me today. And it's just us two as well. Pete McFarlane's with me, of course. He's had a little bit of a hiatus away from well, certainly this show anyway in the last couple of weeks. But this is why I spoke to him just before we started this show, that I was a little bit cautious here because he could well explode with the positivity that he's going to have as we discuss this show. But it's Pete, it's a nice feeling to be able to come on here, having to chat about Everton, who've won 5 of the last 7 games. Obviously the one that was most disappointing was the derby, but everything else has been pretty decent. And I think even yourself, obviously, and me, who's not, I get told that I'm the most miserable Everton fan that anyone's ever met, so it should be quite an interesting chat, this. But when you think about the way in which we played, the games we've had recently, the performances, and I think more important, the confidence these players seem to be having. I'm cautiously making another positive step forward here. How have you felt about everything that's been going on in, well, let's say the last 3 weeks?
I'll be honest, Dave, I'm feeling really down about it.
You should have said that, mate. Everyone will turn off now because we're both saying stuff like that.
Really despondent and really low.
What a start! What a start!
I'm feeling great, mate. No, honestly, I just think that you do set me up to say that I'm really, I'm one of the most positive Evertonians out there. I like to think I'm realistic, and I just think that we're starting to see things come together. Some of the signs that we'd seen when results weren't going our way, I still had faith in this group of players and in this manager, because I could see that things were going in the right direction, if not the results. And it's great to see now that we seem to have potentially turned a bit of a corner. But we can't take Brighton lightly in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a really tough test, this, and I just hope that we can carry on that form into the Brighton game. I think a massive positive for us has been, I think going back to the Aston Villa game in the Cup, I think that was a bit of a turning point for us. And one of the main reasons for that was the way the midfield set up in that game, where we had James Garner playing a little bit more central. The fact that Garner Gay wasn't playing and Onana was able to play in that deeper midfield role.
Yeah.
And I think that game, we accidentally stumbled upon a really good system that kind of suits these players down to the ground. And we're starting to see the best out of these players. And certainly, as I say, James Garner and Amadou Onana, I think it's 2 players who've really stepped up, and we're starting to see the best of them in their rightful position. And as I say, certainly with Amadou Onana, one of my biggest gripes has always been about, I couldn't quite see where he fit in the side. But one of the main issues I had was the fact that I always felt that Garner Gay was always, they were tripping over each other. And I felt that Onana didn't have a set role in that side. But now we're starting to see the play that we all hoped we would do. So, I'm feeling positive, mate.
Interesting what you talk about there in terms of a setup and stuff, because the issue I've had, and I wouldn't go as far to say, we've had a few conversations so far this season, certainly when we lost our first 3 and things didn't look like they were going too well with Sean Dyche, given obviously the last couple of years where we've been, fighting, we've clawed our way to stay in the Premier League. I think many fans, it makes you nervous about Everton when you're going on. Obviously, any club goes on a run of losing games, but I think when we've done that so far this season, and certainly before the last 6 or 7 games, as we're talking about now, I've thought, how does this thing get sorted? How's he going to set this up? How are we going to look in a position? Certainly when we were still waiting for Dominic Calvert-Lewin to come back, how is this going to work? How are we going to score goals? Recruitment wise, got Danjuma in, didn't we? And Beto comes in as well. It didn't feel like we'd be coming into these games with a lot of trepidation, really. And I think that you've got to put a lot of credit towards Sean Dyche, and I didn't think I'd be saying that so quickly this season. But, and like you say, by hook or by crook, I'm not necessarily sure it's simply because he's decided what he's decided, but various injuries, various positions he's had to do, because players that he wanted in those positions might not be available and stuff like that. You mentioned the Trezeguet there. That's a perfect example. But when things start going right, and I'm not saying this and saying that like he's been really lucky the way it's gone, but I think we finally started to see, and this is why I'm trying to stay balanced with this. We've started seeing a side that ticks together really, really well. You spoke about it a little bit then, the system we've got, the big part of it, and we've spoke about him a lot since he came back, because he's actually scored some goals. He's scoring goals again. He looks as this. Oh, this is not the I'm tempting fate here, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin looks like the fittest I've ever seen him as a footballer. He's a big lad, and by a big lad I mean when he first came into us a few years ago, when he famously playing right wing back, he looked like a bit of a pole, didn't he? He looked like he needed a bit more weight, he needed to be stronger. I look at him now, and he's a big lad. He can cope physically, and it looks like the way we play. It looks like the way Dyche likes to set up. Really, with him being I mean, it was always going to be the case. I think with Dyche just playing one forward, but I think seeing him more involved by the fact that we're not playing long balls up to him predominantly. It's looking at, you're playing a ball down the channel and you've got a 10 who's running in the middle of the park. So, he seems to be always involved, but not necessarily in front of goal. Whilst other players, I think it looks like he's really been homing in on this Dyche, where you're trying to get players in and amongst Dyche as soon as in and amongst Calvert-Lewin as soon as you're playing the ball forward, and that to me looks like it's working really well. I mean, I think that West Ham game last week, I think that was the perfect example of how we played with him, because when the ball does go forward, and I think it's what Dyche has been stereotyped against, hasn't he? That's what I'm pretty, fair enough. He did a lot of that when he was at Burnley. It was play two big fellas up front and knock it up to them. There looks to me now, Pete, that there's something a little bit more well thought of by Dyche. Now we've got with Calvert-Lewin back in the side. Doesn't always have to be, Pickford lumping it forward, or anybody who gets it at centre back or in midfield. You're trying to play a ridiculously long ball and just hoping for the best. This now looks, and I think you touched on it with the midfield, a lot more compact, and something that on the counter attack we look ideal.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing with. I was sort of holding back my judgment on Dyche until we had a proper centre forward up front, and obviously we started the season again. And with all respect to Neil Maupay, he was never going to fit into Dyche's way of playing. He was never going to fit into our system. He was always going to struggle. So the fact that we brought Beto in, which kind of took the pressure off a little bit for Calvert-Lewin, in terms of being able to, have a few extra weeks. I know he picked up that facial injury as well. Weirdly, that probably helped him out as well in the long term, because it meant he had another few weeks to work on his general fitness. But I think, like, playing us as a team without a proper centre forward is a little bit like driving a car with three wheels. Do you know what I mean? You've got a chance of getting somewhere, but you've got a chance of getting to where you want to be, but the likelihood is you're going to crash, and that was what was happening. We just didn't have that focal point, and like you say, it's not necessarily just about goals, and it's not necessarily about just lumping it forward. It's having someone where the ball can stick. When we are under pressure, and he can relieve that pressure, he can occupy defenders. The fact that the defenders are having to concentrate so much on Dominic Calvert-Lewin brings other players into the game. Abdoulaye Doucouré, Jack Harrison's been a huge bonus for me as well. Getting Dwight McNeil back in, and I think as well, certainly with McNeil, Harrison, and Doucouré, and James Garner as well, in that sort of, he's like sort of ahead of Onana in that centre of midfield. One thing that's really impressed me this season, and we saw glimpses of it last season, certainly in the Brighton away game, is the press that we're doing. We look so much more confident out of possession. And I almost feel that sometimes, when we are going long, we're not giving the ball away on the edge of our own box that we were doing so much under Frank Lampard, when we were trying to play it out from the back and we were trying to be too clever with it. If we are giving up possession, we're giving up possession in a position where we can press the opposition, and the players are bang on it. I thought Jack Harrison the other night, in the cup, I thought he was absolutely superb against Burnley. I thought his first touch was is as good as I've seen, to be honest with you, Jack
Mm.
Harrison. I'm really impressed with him. Either foot as well. He's obviously left-footed, but his first touch with his right foot is as good as his first touch with his left. But I just think that these players are starting to really gel now. And as I say, we're looking like a balanced side, but it's so crucial to have that focal point up front. And thankfully now, as I say, if Dom, he might pick up little knocks, he might pick up niggles, he might have little issues, but if he does, we still have options now, which is something that we haven't had for so long. The likes of Beto can come in, Shamiti could even come in and put a shift in. I'm more confident now that we've got a balanced side, and certainly and Jared Branthwaite as well. What an impact he's had at the back, in terms of a player who's coming in and he's playing beyond his years, isn't he? He looks like an absolute seasoned pro, and he's putting some of the others to shame, to be honest with you. Some of the other options of more experienced players in that squad, Jared Branthwaite and James Tarkowski are two of the first names on the team sheet. Absolutely superb.
It's funny mentioning, because all week long, like at work, the BBC, if you actually watch Match of the Day as well the other day, and there was Shay Given, who seems to work every day at different places, seems to be on the telly every single day, that lad. He was with the Chappers on Match of the Day too, and they did like almost a study on Branthwaite, and I put on social media straight away, oh, he's crap. You can't, I wouldn't even talk about him. He's that bad, because I got to roast him from Matt Jones when I was doing the post match after the West Ham game, because I was saying about well, he won't be with us for long because there'll be loads of clubs coming in for him, but. In my opinion, sadly, it's the way the way it happens with football these days, isn't it? But whilst we have him, and again, I'm probably getting slated by people listening to this right now, I think he's one of the best centre backs we've seen in a long time. And do you know what? I think many people who haven't seen him or watched him closely will say, "Oh, you can't say that." Look at John Stones. I hate the comparison with John Stones. I don't think he's anything like John Stones, because I think John Stones was a centre back that was basically, to me, a half centre back, because he wants to get forward that much. He wants to carry the ball out. I think Branthwaite is perfectly capable. That we've seen it when we set up the goal, which, by the way, I think was embarrassing what Michail Antonio did when he was just beaten to the ball and he goes down on the floor as if he'd been hit in the head. I thought that was embarrassing. But anyway, with Branthwaite, it feels to me, like you said there, that he puts older professional players who've been going for a long while. And I don't want to say Tarkowski on this, because they've developed a perfect defensive partnership there. But you would think, and this is, I'm saying this for this not to be a slight against Tarkowski, but if you were told about the two of them, and you didn't have to look at the faces because he still looks like a kid, doesn't he? Branthwaite's face, then you'd be the one saying, well, he's definitely the senior of the defensive partnership there. What you mentioned there, the thing I want to get at is that all of a sudden when you start winning games like this, and look, some fans, if I was listening to this, certainly what we're talking about now is, wow, we've actually got a squad here that we can look at. And I think you touched upon it a little bit there, that you look at the bench you've got. If Calvert-Lewin is, well, we hope it never happens again, but a long-term injury or somebody perhaps needs a rest, then you've got to put him on the bench. You mentioned that there's a lot of players there who can get involved in an attacking sense with us. Beto, who's, I don't know. I mean, I think, to me, he's still got a hell of a lot to learn. I think he even said that himself when he came in, and as a regular Premier League player. I think you look at the setup for the goal he put for Ashley Young the other night was superb, and I think that's his game, where he's a big, powerful lad, and he's lightning quick as well, by the way. But the way he just ran it across the touchline and put that ball across it, he can do that every week for me. He doesn't have to be a lump who we have to belt it up to, and hopefully, I think that isn't what Dyche thinks he is. That he's just simply somebody who holds the ball up. He's capable of it, don't get me wrong, but you don't want a striker that being the only thing that they do. We had Doucouré, probably one of our main attacking players, isn't he? You know, we've got, and Schmidt, you mentioned then as well, who's a kid. He's going to develop his game. Danjuma, I think, is an interesting one as well, Pete, because I'd have thought he'd have been a regular since we got him in. I thought he would have been one of the first names on the team sheet, given our previous thoughts to what the team needed and what we lacked when DCL was injured. We needed players who were able to, well, hit the ball at goal, to be honest with you. He's barely had a kick of the game. And I've been really surprised at that. And look, I think the simple reason to say why he's not been is because we've doing well and getting some results recently, and he hasn't been involved. Simply, you leave things as they are, don't you? Excuse me. The one of the things that I was critical of Dyche about was at the derby, and this is a completely different thing that I'm talking about here, where he put Michael Keane on at half time, so we had the back five, and that just didn't work. A back four is as solid as it gets for us at the moment. So that's what I mean by you can't make changes to something that's working well, and he really shouldn't look at it as it is. He started on against Burnley. What did you think of him? Do you think he's somebody who can be a real attribute for us?
I think the difficulty for Danjuma is probably his favourite position is coming in off the left hand side. But I just don't think Dyche fancies him in terms of his work rate and in terms of what he can offer defensively as well. Because when you look at
the other side of it as well, Pete, is sorry to interrupt me. The other side of it as well, I think it's that saying that, you know, you're guilty of your own success. I'm not saying that he's been that way for us, but positional wise, he'd be a dream for many clubs. But for us, we seem to have such a strict lineup now. Like you mentioned there, people are gelling. You've got Harrison, who's come in, he's been like a breath of fresh air. You've got Onana, who's showing what we all hoped he'd show. And I think he's been the subject of many people talking about him since he came. Is the other side of that, probably putting this in a better context, is it just because things are working elsewhere that he's actually not getting a go? Or there are those things you've just started mentioning about various things that Dyche probably doesn't fancy with him?
It's probably a mixture of both, to be honest with you. You know, like the old thing about, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I think certainly when you look at the performances of Dwight McNeil and Harrison, one of the things that those two players offer, like I've touched on before, in terms of their work rate, in terms of their press, in terms of the energy that they bring to the side, and also the fact that they're able to counter attack so quickly. And the other thing as well to notice during games as well. I know you said about us having a strict sort of back four, but Dyche does like to have his fullbacks very narrow, doesn't he? Or he makes it very narrow, certainly from the opposite side of the pitch. But if you notice, when we're out of possession, a lot of the time, if Dwight McNeil isn't pushed right up to do like a high press, he'll actually almost drop down a little bit, and Mykolenko will move across almost as a third centre half. And McNeil offers that little bit of extra defensive cover if they're sort of overloading us on one side. And I think that is something that's been crucial in terms of how we're able to perform and how we're able to play. And also it's the fact that we're able to have that to give that responsibility to the central midfielders to be able to command that area and not have to sort of overload there. So I think with Danjuma, he's a bit of an enigma in terms of how does he fit in. If anywhere, you probably think that would he play in the position that Abdoulaye Doucouré is playing in terms of, you know, just off the forward, sort of slightly, you know, in that number 10 role. But I just don't know whether that suits his game, to be honest with you. I don't think that's probably his best position. Although we did see sort of glimpses of him against Burnley, but he's not really had the impact, has he? There hasn't really been a game yet. I mean, I might be being slightly harsh here given his game time so far, but I don't think we've seen enough of him so far to say, yeah, he can command the place in that starting 11. But certainly, I mean, in terms of his hunger, in terms of, you know, if he wants to come in and prove himself, it's not a bad problem to have. In terms of having players who can come in and have a point to prove. You want every player who starts to be on the toes as well. You want them looking over the shoulder, knowing that there are players breathing down the neck for that starting berth. So I think it's a good problem to have. It's the type of problem that we haven't had for a long time in terms of, I say problem. It's the type of option that we haven't had in so long. When we were barely scraping together, a starting 11 at times last season, and all of a sudden now we're talking about whether we can get game time for players who've come in. So, as I say, it's a good problem to have, but certainly over the course of the season, I'm sure we'll see a lot more of Anna Danjuma and the likes of Beto, Chimiti. I think these players will get more game time as the season goes on, and certainly as the fixtures get more and more congested coming up to December. So yeah, it's crucial that we keep these players fit, keep them ready, and let them know. If you get a chance, you've got to take it with both hands. But yeah, it's as I say, it's a good problem to have, is what I'd say.
It is. I've just been looking then as you're talking on all of our games so far this season. Which one have we played now? Just over a dozen, is it? Games we played so far this season. What have we got? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 13 games we played so far this season. And I can't see on this, and people will correct me, but let's say for the most of them, I'd say at least 10, 11 of them. Possession-wise, we've been, the best we've been is close to the opposition, i.e. being 50-50, like 40% possession, whatever it is. But by and large, games we've won, games where we've played well, our percentage in possession is, I think, notably down quite a bit. I mean, I'm looking at that the other night against Burnley. Burnley had, according to the stats I've got here, over 60% possession against Everton away from home, and we're going to win that game 3-0. Now, I think that indicates how we're best set up here. Now, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about Brighton in a minute or so, but in games against sides that we would imagine we're going to have more possession than them, it seems to me like that's on purpose, because you mentioned it's so narrow. We play defensively with the fullbacks in the back four. I think it's really compact when we need it to be in the midfield. If it seems to me that by and large, I think Dyche has looked at James Garner, for instance, who we were all having a good moan about, that he was playing him on the right side. He played at right back a couple of times, didn't he, towards the end of last season, and the way he's been so far this season. There've been a couple of times when he's been pushed to that right-hand side. But it seems to me like you've got Dyche who's learning these lessons. Obviously, he's never going to admit that. He's never going to go on a press conference and say, yeah, I got it wrong. No manager does that, do they? Even though we'd be saying when we win games, he's going to be saying that's all because of me. That's the way managers are. But when I look at that, I think, are we content with being like that at home? Now, I'm not sure people are comfortable with that. I mean, you look at this one here, the Bournemouth 3-0 win at home. They had, 52% possession over us. You'd expect, if you saw Everton, regardless of how poor we've been in the last couple of years, you'd still expect Everton at home against the let's say, 13, 14 sides to have more possession against those teams when they come to Goodison. Now I'm looking at that thinking, is this a bit of a blueprint that maybe intentionally, or even if it hasn't, is the thing that suits us most? Being able to counter-attack, because I've never typically thought it was our game. Well, certainly not for a long time, because I always used to think there was a problem over us having pace. It's a bugbear I have most seasons, is not having enough pace in that side. But you look at those games we've won, we haven't had the majority of possession against teams. I'm thinking that's, well, certainly starting not to be. It's being done that way on purpose.
I think you talk about blueprints. Ironically, if you look at if you went back to last season and had a look at the Brighton away win, the 5-1, I would be shocked if we had more than 35-40% possession in that game and we won 5-1. And I think that is the blueprint. Can't get my words out. The blueprint of how we do play best. And I think what I touched on before in terms of looking far more comfortable out of possession. I'm happy for the opposition to our possession. It's how you respond to it and how you can still dictate the game by how you press them and how you dictate to them how they're going to play. You don't allow them to have the ball in certain positions. They can pass it across the back four all day long. I'm happy with that. I've always said that. I've never seen the logic in just having a strict passing it out from the back
Yeah.
philosophy. Unless you're a top side, I don't see I don't see how in any way, shape, or form it's going to win you football games if you're not a top side. I think it's going to cost you more goals long term than it will, in terms of you being able to win games that way. And I think a lot of teams try to do that now. A lot of teams try and play it short out from the back. I've always had this thing as well about how if you're a centre half, like Michael Keane as an example. I'm not I don't want to dig him out by the way, but just as an example, when we were playing under Frank Lampard and we were having to play the ball out so much, I've mentioned this before. In terms of psychologically and in terms of just being mentally drained, our back four were absolutely done in by the end of the game, and it wasn't just because they were having to defend; they were having to dictate the play of the game as well. And just I want my defenders to concentrate on defending, and I think that's what Dyche has done. He's gone back to basics, and he knows he's got the talent in the midfield, and he knows he's got players up front now and in wide positions who can impact on the game in a positive way. We know we can break quickly. We've got players now who have the ability to break quickly. Dwight McNeil, for example, he's not exactly lightning quick, but he can carry the ball, and he can and the work rate he puts in, and he's able to pick out a pass. He's able to take a man on the outside. He's able to be composed in possession as well. We're able to hit teams on the break. So I actually feel comfortable sometimes. If you've got an opposition who are passing Burnley tried to do it the other night. The amount of times they tried to play it out from the back, and we won the ball back high. Do you know what I mean? We gifted them possession just to win it back in a higher position, if that makes sense. And as I say, I felt that a couple of times Burnley broke our line when the keeper played it straight down the middle to it was Nathan Redmond, wasn't it, the one who used to play for Southampton? And that was the only time when they looked kind of dangerous, where they broke that sort of press that we were trying to do. So that's something we need to be wary of. But by and large, as I say, I just think a lot of teams now like to try and play that ball out from the back and like to keep possession and but don't really do much with it. And as I say, it's just so crucial that we look comfortable and that we, stay on our toes, and that we try and dictate to them how they keep the possession. We don't allow them to damage us in bad areas. We need to press when it's right and to sit back when it's right. And I think that's the balance we're getting right now. And as I say, the possession stats, I'm always one of those. I judge a game from my eyes, not on stats. The Burnley game the other night, for example.
People become too obsessed with those things, don't they?
How many times did we hear under Roberto Martinez? I remember getting beat 4-0 in the derby, and he came out and said we were phenomenal, and he was bringing out all kinds of possession stats, and I was like, it doesn't mean anything. It literally it means nothing at the end. The only thing that matters at the end of the game is the final score. That's the only stat that matters at the end of the day. You can have a player who's got 100% pass success rate, but then when you look at it, they're all 5-yard passes. James McCarthy, for me, there was a time when James McCarthy, when he first came in, thought he was great for Everton. He did a great job. He broke the play up and he played the simple pass. But people got so hung up on his passing stats. And I was looking at it thinking, but does he really impact the game with that passing? Does he really positively impact the game with the passing? I was more, concentrating on his defensive stats because he was great at winning the ball back. But in terms of purely on passing, it kind of didn't tell the full story. And that's why I just think that obviously if you've got more possession, you've got, in theory, you would say that you'd have more chance of winning a football game. But I just don't think that that's the way anymore because of the amount of possession that teams have literally on the edge of their own box. And as I say, if a team's passing the ball around on the edge of their own box, I'm happy. Crack on. Do it all day if you want. Eventually we'll break you. Eventually we'll get the ball off you, and eventually we'll get a breakthrough. So, yeah, as I say, whether it's, I do believe it is by design. I do believe it is a deliberate tactic by Dyche to allow to give up that possession or to not be too hung up on possession stats. And I think we are actually seeing the rewards for that. As I say, it's a different way of playing than a lot of teams are trying to play now, which is only going to be a good thing. But Brighton's a kind of the litmus test for this now, because I'm sure they'll be hitting after last season. They'll be looking at that performance. They'll have analysed that to the hilt. I'm sure they'll have been looking at that and looking at ways that they can change that to try and damage us on Saturday. So it's a big game. It's a huge game for us.
You know, the interesting thing about that as well is it's difficult, I think, mentality wise for us as fans to go into Goodison, and you sort of 9 times out of 10 know you're playing the side that you're going to let have the ball more than us. I think that's a difficult thing for many psychology wise to go in and think we're at home, we need to be dominating this, we need to be dominating that. Exactly what you said, possession wise. And just to reiterate what you were saying there about that away game, that 5-1 win away at Brighton last season, we had 22% of the possession to go there and win 5-1.
Yeah.
And, you know, pushing this on, because we've only got a few minutes left, pushing this on to the game against Brighton at home, be really, really interesting how this is lined up against the side that I think certainly, even though we beat them 5-1, was a bit of an anomaly for them at the time, because they've been one of my favourite sides. If you were to ask me who do you like the most in the Premier League aside from Everton, and I think they've got one striker there who is going to be big time, and I'm really intrigued to see how he gets on. I'm assuming he's still fit because he played the other day. But this lad Ferguson, ironically, is the name he's got. He's going to be a big threat for them. And the things I really admire about Brighton is they're the type of club, and this has happened before with certain other clubs who've got that well of a structure, and I think that's almost the stereotype people have thrown at Brighton, given the recruitment over the years. But they've been a side that's just simply able to say, well, goodbye if you don't want to be with us. We've got somebody else to step in. Tomorrow is a fascinating game for me, and I think many other people who aren't fans of Everton, they'll be looking at this thinking this is really intriguing, given the fact we found some form, and you've got a Brighton side who, you know, in Europe as well this season, seems to be they might have struggled a little bit with that so far. Got that win against Ajax, didn't he, the other day? This is a really, really test for us anyway, as we know. It'll be interesting the way both sides line up in this. I mean, I think it'll almost be like, well, we'll give you the ball for 10 minutes. You give us the ball for 10 minutes, because they're not necessarily both comfortable at having the ball for the entirety of a game.
Yeah, and that's it. But I think that's what Evan Ferguson has brought to Brighton as well. He's brought like a little bit of a sprinkle of magic, if you like, something a little bit different to what they were used to. I think, you know, he's only a young kid. Is he 19? Isn't he? And 19 coming up to 20. You know, I think he's got everything. Left foot, right foot. He can score from distance. He's great in the air. He's an all round top centre forward. So that like you say, that's the most interesting battle, if you like. If he starts tomorrow, I think that'll be the interesting battle between him and Branthwaite and him and Tarkowski. I think that's where the game is won or lost. I think if we can keep him quiet, I think he will be their biggest threat. But then they've got quality throughout the side, haven't they? But again, it's massive tomorrow in terms of us not allowing them to dictate to us how the game is played out. And as I say, we have to be patient with the side. They will have a lot of the ball. I can guarantee it. They will have a lot of the ball, but it's up to us as supporters as well to be patient and just to keep in mind what happened last season. We are capable of beating them tomorrow, more than capable at Goodison Park. You know, Brighton have obviously. They probably haven't started the season as well as they would have hoped, but they still got quality in that side, and they've got a really good manager. But yeah, I think we should go in there full of confidence. I think the results recently will give us that confidence. I think the players will be confident because of the results and also because of how they performed last season against them. I think it's a really intriguing game tomorrow. But yeah, I've got faith in the players. I think we can go out and do a job on them. But yeah, keep Evan Ferguson quiet. And as I say, just keep patient with the side. Because again, the other thing about it as well is it's so crucial. I mean, it's obviously like a bit of a cliche, it's a bit of an obvious thing, but the first goal is always so crucial, isn't it? If we can get ahead, then the game opens up and Brighton have to come at us. Then, as we saw last season, that's when they're most vulnerable, because they do start committing men forward. They do start like sort of bringing it out from the back. They will carry the ball out from the back rather than playing it into the midfield to try and create a little bit of extra space. But what that does then is it leaves space in behind. So again, it's all about sort of being on our toes and being disciplined and hopefully trying to hit them on the break.
I think that spot on analysis is how we want it to go. Again, I think to many people listening, and people will reply to us, what we're putting out in this weekly is I'll ask the question now. How comfortably are you? Take away the result for a moment or two, which is obviously ironically, it's the thing we need to get. But take that out of how comfortable you are watching Everton play. I think that's sort of been the theme of what we've spoken about. Also, we're looking for just our second Premier League win of this season, so it shows you now where we are. And I know, we've only got 10 points, but we're 5 points ahead of the bottom three. I think many people would have took that at the start of the season. The way things are now definitely feel a lot more positive. And yeah, I mean, the fixture list as well is something that we'll focus on talking about over the weekend, and certainly on the weekly next week. But by and large, and again, I put this on my Twitter, does it slightly feel like we're a team? Because it feels like for a long time beforehand that we certainly weren't. So yeah, it feels like a little bit of a different Everton, but we know the history of talking them up and see what happens after it. But I think it's going to be a fascinating game at Goodison tomorrow. Don't forget, we'll have post match immediately after that game finish at around 5 o'clock down at the Denby as well. Make sure you come and join us if you're in and around, and say hello and have a chat with us. We always welcome anybody who's around. And Everton versus Brighton. I think it's going to be a humdinger. We'll speak to you soon. Up the Toffees.